The following program is a production of KSPS Public Television and is made possible by the Friends of Seven.
Welcome to the Davenport Hotel, ma'am.
Thank you.
The Davenport Hotel. I'd heard so much about this place. A world-famous hotel right here in Spokane. Imagine the money that built this. Imagine the people who stayed here. What a story this hotel must have.
It was a special time to go and to visit my grandma and sit in that lobby and feel like you were a grown-up and an elegant person.
The Davenport is an environment where people can feel special. There's a specialness about life just by being inside, just by hanging out here.
It was the place of Spokane. It was the crown jewel of Spokane. This is where you went if you wanted to really make a hit with your girlfriend or your wife or a business partner or business acquaintance or whatever. You went to the Davenport Hotel.
When people my age look back, we think, we're young again. We're going to dance at the Davenport. We're going to dine at the Davenport. Well, certainly, physically, we're not young again, but we're young because of the Davenport in our hearts and in our spirits.
The Davenport, for my husband and for me, would register as probably one of the happiest parts of our lives.
The Davenport Hotel is grand again. Hello, I'm Ellen Travolta in the lobby of the Davenport Hotel. The Davenport is one of America's exceptional hotels when it opens in 1914. It sees 2 world wars, the invention of radio and television, and people walking on the moon. It hosts countless luminaries, banquets, receptions, honeymoons, and dances. Indeed, everything people do in the inland Northwest for most of the 20th century, they do here at the Davenport. Then the hotel is closed, and we almost lose it. During the hotel's darkest days, a demolition team figures the entire block can be brought to the ground in 20 seconds. Thank goodness that's not the way our story ends. Our story begins with a man, a waffle iron, and a dream 100 years ago. Llewellyn Marks Louis Davenport comes to Spokane Falls, Washington Territory from California in the spring of 1889. He starts working for his uncle Elijah in the Pride of Spokane restaurant. He has no restaurant experience at the time.
When Louis's uncle came into Spokane in 1883, it was world famous. Spokane was. There were so many people coming here and so much building going on and so much business. And from that time on, there was a shortage of hotels and restaurants. So Louis's uncle was the original entrepreneur of the Davenport family force, pioneer in Spokane in that industry. And then he sent for Louis.
A quick study, Louis becomes proprietor of the restaurant that summer, days before a small fire breaks out among the wooden buildings downtown. A new system of fire hydrants proves useless when the man who knows how to turn them on cannot be found. The fire burns until it runs out of fuel. 32 square blocks, including the Pride of Spokane restaurant, are turned to ashes in one afternoon.
Louis Davenport was one of the young, strong men who
was cleaning up the bricks and the ashes and the scorched metal and starting to rebuild the city. And that's how he made the original investment for his first restaurant. So the Davenport emerges from this total destruction, kind of a nice beginning to the story.
Louis joins legions of able-bodied men in rebuilding the city from scratch. He will build what he now knows how to do. In a tent with equipment salvaged from the fire, he opens Davenport's famous waffle foundry. It too burns to the ground. Louis starts over yet again. This time he leases a building made with bricks.
I think he really was a genius in his business, had a knack for it. The story is that he came from San Francisco with all this restaurant experience, but that's not true. He was 20 years old when he came here, and his prior work experience had been as a clerk, and the most recent experience was in San Francisco, but he worked for a flour mill as a clerk. So I think it was something that was just an innate talent. He had a sixth sense for how to treat people and what people wanted, and just gave them the ultimate in hospitality.
By the time this menu is printed for patrons on New Year's Day, Davenport's is no longer a waffle foundry, but a popular and prosperous full-service restaurant. It offers 100 items, not counting desserts, lobster cutlets a la hollandaise, 30 cents, English plum pudding with hard sauce, a dime. Meanwhile, another young man in Spokane Falls joins his uncle working in a bank. Neither can possibly imagine that together they will soon build one of America's exceptional hotels. The fire of 1889 provides a rare opportunity to build a city from scratch. Mining, timber, agriculture, and the railroads are pouring money into the region. Spokane is poised to become one of the great cities of the West.
Spokane was founded by enterprising people who wanted to equal or surpass the cities that they had left. They wanted to be remembered by what they had built. After all, that's how we remember the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and the medieval builders. So why not the founders of Spokane? They had a lot of confidence in Spokane. They really believed that they had another Chicago or New York in the makings, and they didn't want to be laughed at for silly little buildings.
Among the people who help rebuild Spokane is Kirtland Cutter. At the time of the big fire, he's a teller in his uncle's bank, but his heart is in a more creative endeavor.
He was an artist. He probably had bohemian instincts, but he loved society, and he had to conform to Spokane society. He certainly dressed very elegantly, but he had a disadvantage as a very young man. Even before he was 20, he went completely bald, and so he always wore a wig. And the story is that he didn't want this to show, so he had 3 wigs. One that looked about right, another one that maybe needed a haircut, and then after the haircut, he put on the short one. I suppose he did this to give the illusion that his hair was truly growing and that it was his own. I don't suppose it fooled anybody.
Cutter is an artist, but finds a lack of satisfaction in the fine arts. He needs something that fits into daily life, something that not only pleases the eye, but also contributes to the comfort and convenience of his fellow man. He finds what he needs in what he calls art incarnate, architecture. Cutter designs his first house for his uncle at the bank, then another and another for his uncle's partners at the bank. Cutter quickly becomes architect to the leaders of Spokane Falls, including a restaurant man by the name of Davenport.
I don't consider this an extravagant comparison, but look at, you have Florence, in 1500, and you have a lot of money there, and you have some very enlightened people who have that money, and so they hire a Michelangelo and a Leonardo, both at the same period of time in the same city. And if those things had not come together, Florence wouldn't be Florence. And I think it was the same kind of combination of luck that created the Davenport. It wouldn't have happened under other circumstances and other personalities. That's why I said with Davenport and Cutter coming together, you know, what a great combination. What an amazing bit of luck for Spokane.
At the turn of the century, Davenport hires Cutter for the first time. He wants his restaurant to please the eye as well as contribute to the comfort and convenience of his customers. Cutter gives it some thought and comes up with a plan to add a Mission Revival-style facade of white stucco, arched windows, and a red tile roof. It transforms what is a plain-looking brick building into a work of art. In 1904, Davenport expands up and out. He buys the building to the south, remodels it on the ground floor, and adds guest rooms above. Maud Pennington runs it as the Pennington Hotel. Above the restaurant, Davenport adds an apartment for himself, some banquet rooms, and a ballroom. Not just any ballroom. Davenport instructs Cutter to spare no expense in making his the finest ballroom and reception hall in the West, the Hall of the Doges. The Hall of the Doges is the queen of Spokane ballrooms, built at a cost of $30,000. It is named for the rulers of medieval Italy. This is what their palaces inspire. The room is supported separately from the rest of the building on steel girders going down to the rock foundation in the basement. This way, dancers above do not disturb diners below. This design feature will save the room in about 100 years. Outside, Cutter continues the facade and makes the two buildings appear as one. This view remains unchanged for the next 97 years. The combination of excellent service and incomparable surroundings brings Davenport national attention.
The best sample of Spokane's spirit crystallized is Davenport's restaurant. 15 years ago, the owner of this concern ran a waffle wagon. Then, he rented a hole in the wall and was himself cashier, cook, waiter, scullion. The business soon outgrew its quarters. Davenport grew with the business. This is not a biography, so just let me say that Davenport's restaurant is the best, most unique, and nearest perfect restaurant in America, perhaps the world. All trails lead to the Davenport. Albert Hubbard, editor, The Philistine, March 1906.
He was a connoisseur in the deepest sense of the word. He was an artist, really. Very particular, loved things to be right. And that's the theme of his whole life. He wanted the building just right. He wanted the service just right. He wanted the flower arrangements just right, and he must have been a fascinating person.
In the summer of 1906, Louis Davenport travels east to welcome Maud Pennington's sister, Verus, back from a trip to Europe. The two are married in New York and return to Spokane as husband and wife. They make their new home in this apartment above the restaurant. Here, Llewellyn Marks Davenport, Jr. is born in the summer of 1907. Here, Theodore Roosevelt stays. Here, the man who starts with a waffle iron and a dream plans even grander things.
It was said that mail could be addressed simply to the Davenport Hotel from around the country or overseas, and it would arrive here in Spokane at the Davenport Hotel.
Local authors and historians Tony and Suzanne Bamonte write the definitive historical book on the Davenport Hotel and the people associated with it. It is released at Auntie's bookstore and quickly becomes the store's all-time bestseller. Years in the making and deeply researched, the book presents the most complete history ever published of the Davenport Hotel.
There were so many people that we've ran into or heard about that, you know, they met their spouses here, they fell in love here, they had their first dates here, they had their honeymoons here, things like that. So it's the place. It was the place of Spokane. It was the crown jewel of Spokane. This is where you went if you wanted to really make a hit with your girlfriend or your wife or a business partner or business acquaintance or whatever. You went to the Davenport Hotel.
We'd been gathering information while we were doing research on other projects, and it just seemed like a natural project to take on. And just turned into quite a bit more than we thought, but I think basically it is because it's Spokane's most beloved, famous landmark, that it was very fitting, and because it was being restored, now was the time.
The project gives the Mamontes a rare understanding of the man behind the legend, including a possible reason for Louis Davenport's demand that all things in his establishment be neat and clean.
We have a hypothesis. His father was a prisoner during the Civil War, Andersonville prison, which was the worst Confederate prison in the United States. And during the time that he was a prisoner, part of that time, over 13,000 men died of disease and starvation. So we think that the father passed that on to the son, that cleanliness, how important it was to be clean.
Cleanliness at the Davenport goes beyond the usual. For many years, even the money is laundered. Bills are bank fresh and coins are shiny new.
I washed money. I polished money. We'd go down in the basement, and they had a big drum down there that was sealed and it had mercury in it. And they'd bring the money down in silver money and the silverware. We'd put all the forks in the drum, and I forgot how long we run them, but it would tumble. Then we'd take the forks out and we'd put all the knives and so on and so forth till we had all the silverware. Then the last thing we did was polish money, all the silver money.
The Bamontes partner with Peak Video to produce a companion video to the book.
You're seeing the open anyway.
Jim Bolzer takes the pictures and edits the program. Robin Briley writes the script with her father, who also hosts the show. Bob Briley spends 55 years in broadcasting and remembers doing many of his interviews in the various rooms of the Davenport Hotel.
Well, the Hall of Doges was one that I used to go to once in a while to cover somebody that was speaking at a luncheon there, or maybe to invited to a luncheon there for some reason or other. And that and the Isabella Room, of course, and the Marie Antoinette always just made my eyes bulge, so to speak. I couldn't. It was hard to take in the whole thing and at one glance and see all the combination of colors, the size of the room, the way it was laid out. Very kind of an awesome place to be in.
Broadcasting and the Davenport get along well from the beginning. From its tower on the roof, KHQ Radio broadcasts many of its early programs live from studios in the Davenport Hotel. In the process of recording other people's Davenport memories, Briley remembers some of his own, like the evening he develops a taste for olives in Davenport's restaurant.
When I was a little kid, my mother took me to my mother and her escort took me to the Italian Gardens for dinner, and there was dancing. And I guess I was 3 and maybe 4. My father had died when I was a very small boy. And my mother and her escort were dancing, and they looked back over at the table, and I was up on the table on my hands and knees going for the olive dish, which created a bit of a stir. But she told me that one of the waiters came along and sat me back in my chair and put the olives in front of me so that I could gorge myself on them.
Another journalist, a writer for the Spokesman Review, meets her husband and holds her wedding reception at the Davenport Hotel. Edna Mae Brown writes as Dorothy Dean in the 1930s and lunches frequently with Louis Davenport.
Well, he was a very nice man. He had a sense of humor, but it was a quiet, dry sense of humor. But he was very, very informative and very entertaining if you had a chance to talk to him. And he was always a gentleman. He was always dressed just perfectly and always cordial and formal in his presentation. and everybody liked him.
He was often a man of the people, although he was very quiet and very modest, small in stature. Usually, I remember tweed suits being a favorite of his, sort of salt and pepper tweed suit. And he would hold forth most of each day on the mezzanine of the Davenport Hotel. And he would walk around the entire mezzanine looking down in the lobby, and he would talk to people. Later, he'd come down in the lobby, walk up to people and say, "I'm Louis Davenport. Where are you from?"
Dorothy Powers also writes for the Spokesman Review and retires as its associate editor after 40 years on the job. She remembers Louis Davenport's support of the war effort by letting thousands of servicemen and women stay at his hotel.
Louis Davenport became kind of a universal father to thousands of young men and women. He was greatly loved by them all, but he never once mentioned his part. I never heard him refer to what he'd done for the military kids. The Davenport became a translation of life in the 1940s for everyone that a soldier or sailor or Marine or whack or waff brought back to this. It introduced the rest of the United States to Spokane. So it wasn't just the Davenport that became part of everyone's life who had ever known about it or been shown it, but it was the city of Spokane. The hotel itself made Spokane famous rather than the other way around.
The idea of building a grand new hotel in Spokane is hatched in 1906 by a group of Spokane businessmen. Louis Davenport is asked to manage the operation. Kirtland Cutter is asked to design it. Cutter makes the hotel fit in with his earlier work on Davenport's restaurant. A sketch of his idea is published in the Spokesman Review Sunday, the 11th of October, 1908. It is a Davenport hotel that is never to be built. Investors called the proposal too elaborate, too complicated, and too expensive. Cutter presents new plans for a taller, simpler Davenport hotel in 1909. The plans are approved. This is photograph number 1 in a series of photographs taken from the same location beginning April 2nd, 1913. The Davenport Hotel starts as a 30-foot deep hole in the ground. This is what the camera sees for the next 8 months, animated here for the first time since the photos are taken. The Davenport Hotel becomes a monument to Western progress, the most modern hostelry in the United States. It is the first hotel with air conditioning, the first hotel with a pipe organ, the first hotel with a central vacuum system, and the first hotel to deliver ice water to each guest for free through specially designed faucets in each of the 405 rooms. There are more than 15,000 pieces in the hotel's silver service, dozens of enormous carpets weighing as much as half a ton each, 20 synchronized clocks, and 450 telephones, making the hotel the largest private branch exchange in the Northwest. It is, as one newspaper reporter calls it, a wonderland. The Davenport Hotel opens for business Tuesday, September 1st, 1914, without a hitch. 2 weeks later, a grand opening warms Spokane's greatest hotel with dignity the keynote. The city will never be the same.
Spokane last evening underwent the transition from a big country town into a metropolis. The traditional marks of the mining camp and the frontier were formally discarded, and tailored ennoblements became the convention, replacing the bandana handkerchief and the flannel shirt of early days. W.J. Hendley, Mayor, Spokane, Washington.
The first big social event at the Davenport Hotel is a gorgeously crowded ball in the Marie Antoinette Ballroom. It features a whirl of fashion, a flow of wit, and joy unconfined.
The first first real opening of the Davenport Hotel came last night, and a pace was set for the future that will be a test of speed as far as pleasure is concerned. By 7:15, both fronts of the hotel were lined with motors, electrics, and taxis, and the atmosphere was charged with the electric spark of pleasure. There was an impromptu speech by J.D. Sherwood, who paid pretty compliments to Mr. Davenport and Mr. Cutter, echoing the feeling of the public on the matter, for there is a glad, warm feeling about the heart of every real Spokaneite when the Davenport Hotel is mentioned. Betty Graham, The Spokesman Review, September 20th, 1914.
In 1921, Architect and Engineer magazine publishes a list of the 10 most notable examples of architecture in Spokane. 6 bear Cutter's name. The Davenport Hotel is at the top of the list. The Davenport Hotel, like a living organism, is always changing. A 13th floor is added in 1917. Davenport's restaurant is gutted and turned into the Italian Gardens in 1922. Louis Davenport buys out his partners and becomes sole owner of the entire operation in 1928. He adds a south tower to the hotel in 1929. This is the Davenport Hotel most people alive today remember.
I can just remember walking around with my mouth open, looking, particularly in the lobby, looking up at the ceiling and the fountain that they had there, and listening to the bellhops going by, shouting out things. You know, it was really incredibly interesting for a young boy. And then we went into the Italian Gardens for as I remember, it was for lunch, and it was, you know, so elegant and so unlike a regular restaurant that we would have in Coeur d'Alene that I couldn't believe it.
Cutter enjoys animals and brings many of them into the Davenport Hotel. Tropical songbirds chirp, some even talk in cages throughout the hotel. Fish bubble in the lobby fountain, as well as in 2 large glass columns in the Italian Gardens. Animals even put on a show in the washrooms.
I went down these beautiful stairs that they had right near the elevators that went down to the men's room. And the men's room had a row of urinals, and they were quite high for a little boy. And over above them was this fish tank that sort of separated it. There was 1 row on one side and 1 row on the other side. And they had tropical fish, which I'd never seen before, swimming around. And I used to go down there in my early childhood as often as I could and extend the length of time that I spent there just to watch the fish, until my dad once in a while would come down and get me and drag me back up.
The Davenport Hotel is a sampler plate of the world. Here you can experience a variety of people, food, architecture, and music, all under one roof. It is shopping mall, convention center, and concert hall long before any of these are built separately in the inland Northwest.
So that this opened up to everyone who came in there a vista of a different kind of life, a very elegant, gracious kind of life that not only enchanted us, but enriched us. It taught us a great deal, just looking and watching people and hearing different languages spoken in that lobby. It was a kind of a grade school education in itself, and I'm sure that if you were a grown-up and you came there, it was just almost as much of an education, because you had never seen in little towns around the Pacific Northwest the kind of life that took place within the walls of the Davenport Hotel.
Gentlemen always wear hats to the Davenport Hotel. Some of them even wear spats. The hotel is a stage for the world in Spokane, and a stage for Spokane to the world. Either way, one must be properly dressed for the occasion. Of all the public spaces at the Davenport Hotel, this is my favorite, the Marie Antoinette Ballroom. These are the original floors, suspended on cable to keep dancers light on their feet. These are the original chandeliers, purchased in 1914 at $10,000 each. If all the world is a stage, as William Shakespeare says, then this is one of the most elegant upon which I have ever been. You just feel special here. I guess that's the point. The Marie Antoinette Ballroom is the social center of the Davenport Hotel. Here the highest affairs are held in a room fitting the occasions. Among the celebrated guests who find their way to Spokane and the famous Davenport Hotel is Charles Lindbergh, fresh from his history-making flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis.
I can remember when I was a kid, Lindbergh came to town. I was about 4 years old, I think, and I can remember going to Phelps Field and sitting on my grandfather's shoulders, looking at this great big sea of people that surrounded the spirit of St. Louis. And then there was a big parade downtown, and Lindbergh was escorted to the Davenport Hotel where he stayed.
The Marie Antoinette Ballroom at the Davenport Hotel is perhaps never more packed than when it tenders a banquet for Colonel Lindbergh on September 12, 1927. He's the tall fellow in this photograph, taken in a room filled to capacity by citizens eager to see and hear the first major celebrity of the modern age. Tickets for the banquet are $4 each, more than the cost of a room at the hotel. For their money, guests enjoy a feast of roast stuffed imperial squab on raisin toast, followed by coupe au marron, Limburg, and gâteau spirit of St. Louis, and an evening they will never forget. The Marie Antoinette Ballroom is also known for kindling a few romances. On a date in this ballroom, Roy and Fern Bartlett learn a new dance.
That's where we first did the hokey pokey. You put your right arm out, put your left arm out, and turn it all about. So on our wedding night, that was our honeymoon. We spent a few extra dollars to stay at the Davenport.
The room that night cost the Bartletts $4, but it isn't just a room, it is a room at the Davenport Hotel, and they remembered that $4 investment, just as those who dine with Lindbergh for the rest of their lives.
Oh, and the luxurious lobby, and the birds and the flowers, oh, beautiful. And of course, the room that we stayed in wasn't that spectacular, it was just a room. But you knew you were staying at the Davenport Hotel, and we got the original receipt where Roy paid for the room, and that was almost 61 years ago.
Two people are responsible for the artistic vision that restores the visual elegance of the Davenport Hotel, Janice and Melville Holmes. The local husband and wife team find their greatest challenge and greatest joy in restoring the Marie Antoinette Ballroom. Before the room is completed, Janice passes suddenly the day after Christmas, 2000. Melville works on the rest of the hotel alone. A portrait he paints of his wife hangs in the room she helps create.
Whatever are any refreshing sensibilities that go into that room, I think are 50% or more hers. I mean, the room would not be what it is. I wouldn't be the person that I am. Janice Holmes is responsible for a great degree of what is in that room, and if there is that which is refreshing and lovely and light and uplifting to people, a lot of that is owed to her.
Louis Davenport spends more than half a century at the top of his game. In failing health, Davenport sells his hotel in 1945. In 1951, he dies in his suite at the Davenport. In the decades around the turn of the century, people of all classes keep in touch with postcards. The Davenport Hotel is featured on many of them, and many of them survive to give us a glimpse into life at that time.
Reading the postcards, the messages, I think that just people who spent time in the Davenport, it made an impression on them. Not only just the design of it, which I think often they were bowled over how beautiful it was, but the service. Often you read about how impressed people were with the service, how fine it was, the attention to detail.
This is a very good picture of this famous restaurant. They charged you $1 for a seat and your meal comes extra. One can do very well for $1 to $2 per meal. You can't get anything here for less than 50 cents. Bye-bye.
Dear Betsy,
Arrived here yesterday and danced the night away. What a grand hotel this is. Mother bought me a darling sweater at the sports shop. The Davenport has absolutely everything.
Reading these postcards from Frank's collection is like listening in on a party line in a conversation a century old.
One thing, they're always sort of cheap. You know, there was a penny postcard and there's a penny for a stamp. And also I think people traveled and they like to show off, you know, where they were visiting. But I think another interesting thing about collecting postcards has to do with the messages you'll see written on them, what people were saying about the community. And that's a lot of fun, to kind of eavesdrop on conversations that happened almost 100 years ago. I remember distinctly I have one card of the main dining room, and it says, you know, here's where Marguerite and I had dinner. Aren't we swell? You know, what a cool message is that? And just the language that's used, you know, swell. So it's fun to read.
Just to say that we are Northwest, and so far are very well pleased with Spokane. It is a fine city of 108,000 and growing rapidly. Haven't decided definitely whether I'll stay or not. Caleb will stay, however. The Davenport opposite side is the finest west of Chicago, they say. Best wishes to all, from Mother.
We know so much about the way things are at the Davenport Hotel because of photographs, particularly those of Charles Libby and Son. Libby opens his portrait business in 1901 and soon heads outside to record a new century as it unfolds in the inland Northwest. In 1910, Libby starts taking panoramic photos using a number 8 circuit outfit manufactured by the Eastman Kodak Company. This is that camera, preserved in the archives of the Museum of Arts and Culture. It records a panoramic image by moving the camera and film at precisely the same speed, while a small slit wipes the image on film. Libby and Son share 2 strengths. 1, they take exceptionally good photographs, photographs that reveal incredible detail even under high magnification. 2, they date and number everything, which is an archivist's and researcher's dream. More than 200,000 Libby images survive in the museum's archives. The collection gives us a priceless glimpse into the rear-view mirror of time and the faces of those who live and laugh and love before us. In the years after Louis Davenport sells his hotel, it changes hands half a dozen times. None of the subsequent owners has Davenport's same passion and talent for running one of America's exceptional hotels. Those who remember the Davenport in its glory are saddened in its decline.
They sent us to the Davenport Hotel, there was hardly anybody even at the desk. It was almost deserted, I remember when we got there. And finally, they found somebody to take us up to the room and open the door, and it was like going into a refrigerator. It was really cold, and the room was run down. The paint was kind of peeling on the walls, and as I remember it, my wife didn't think that even the sheets looked very clean on the bed. I tell you, that it was really what you would class as almost a second-rate hotel at that time, but we stayed there overnight. And I'm sure that was right near the end of the time that anybody stayed at the Davenport.
There's an era in Spokane that just isn't anywhere else. It's the era of the Davenport Hotel.
In the 60s and 70s, efforts are made to modernize the Davenport Hotel. Her timeless classic architecture is covered with red velvet carpet and orange flock wallpaper to compete with cheap motels. Hundreds of rooms of antique furniture are replaced with vinyl and chrome. After decades of red ink, the once grand Davenport Hotel can bleed no longer and goes into receivership. Mortgage holder Lomas and Nettleton closes the door in the summer of 1985.
And that determination was made after extensive research under my direction there, that it would be in the best interest from an investment lender standpoint to close it. I did that. Rightly or wrongly, in the eyes of a lot of Spokane people under massive public criticism, it was determined to close the property.
In November 1986, an article appears in the Spokane Chronicle saying, Lomas and Nettleton is investigating viable options to dispose of the Davenport Hotel. One way involves dismantling and selling the hotel piece by piece. The other involves imploding it and hauling off the debris. A demolition contractor estimates he can bring the entire block to the ground in a merciful 20 seconds.
The Davenport closing was sort of the end of my childhood and the end of that special time in your life that seems magical and special. And that when it closed, it was like the door on my childhood closed too, and kind of had to grow up and face the realities of the real world, that some things don't go on forever.
Lomas, never when Lomas had it would that have been the intention. However, to present to interested, quote, end quote, possible purchasers what the cost of that would be, not with the intention of doing it, but to establish some numbers that an interested party could rely on without having to go down to the building department of Spokane and make those type of inquiries and find out what the code restrictions were and whatever. I did it, but I didn't do it with the intention ever of doing it.
If we had lost the Davenport, that's a topic I would shudder to even think about because I think it really was the soul of the community. I think of the lobby as being Spokane's living room, a great meeting place, the famous saying, meet me by the fireplace, which is what people would do. So I think it would have been a devastating loss, not only of that architectural landmark, but just symbolically to the community. To lose that, I think would have been devastating. It's unthinkable. I think it's a great part of Spokane's skyline too. It's one of the taller buildings downtown. And to think in 1913 they built a 12-story building, if we're losing that now, we're going downhill. We're becoming less of a city.
In May of 2000, a man who builds his reputation on the funny idea of having square feet pays $6.5 million for the Davenport Hotel, giving him 300,000 of the most admired square feet in town at $20 a square foot. Walt Worthy and his wife Karen build and own the Rock Point Corporate Center north of downtown, one of the largest office complexes in the state. Walt and Karen date at the Davenport in the early 1970s, though can't afford to do so very often. Not even in their wildest dreams can they imagine walking in the footsteps of Davenport and Cutter to build a new Davenport Hotel.
We took trips all over the U.S. after purchasing the hotel, Karen and I did, to try to figure out what we thought would be appropriate for the lobby and what we thought would be appropriate for the ballrooms. And then we listened to various different so-called experts. Melville Holmes, the local artist here from Spokane, was more helpful than perhaps anybody else that we have collaborated with on these. But in the end, it was Karen and I that had to say, yes, this looks right, go for it. Yes, that carpet looks right, go for it. Or no, it doesn't, we're not going to do it.
From the Worthies' home video, we can see what they see going from hotel to hotel. They view each property both as guests and as hoteliers, speaking their comments onto the tape for review back in Spokane.
These pots are just excellent. I think we could use quite a few of them in the Davenport. Here we're seeing how not to do the plants at the Davenport or anywhere else. Looks pretty pitiful.
Another one of the ballrooms. Again, no problem competing with this. No, I wouldn't pick the colors. I wouldn't pick anything. If we can't do better than this, we need shooting.
We kept looking until we thought we found the right solution. And basically that was everything from the paint colors that you see right on down to the carpet that we chose or the layout for the rooms. We had layouts with 400 rooms to start with, and we wound up with less than 300, and had so-called good advice to build it both ways. So in the end, the buck stops here. It was up to Karen and I to figure out what is appropriate for the hotel, and hopefully we've done a good job in most places.
Everything costs more and takes longer than you think. That is Davenport's law in the 19th century and Worthy's law in the 21st. The Davenport's original construction is projected to cost $1,750,000. It passes $2 million during construction and tops out at $3 million. But that's old news. The Davenport's renovation is projected to cost $15 million. It passes twice that. At the peak of the project, Worthy spends more than $100,000 a day.
All the pipes are gone, all the wiring's gone, all the roof drains are gone, everything's brand new, all new systems. The elevators are new, the sprinkler system's new, so we didn't reuse any mechanical systems whatsoever. So it's a brand new hotel. How's it going? Good. That's amazing. Our initial purchase was over 1 million feet of drywall, and we ran out 2 floors down. So it takes a lot of it. Well worthy.
Building a house with just a few bedrooms can be a real test for a marriage. The stress of building something with 300 bedrooms is unimaginable. Through it all, the Worthies say the Davenport project brings them closer together.
We don't have enough money left to be separate, so we have to be together.
We discussed it early on at length and decided that if we did proceed, that we were going to do it together and fulfill this commitment.
And it had to be fun.
And we've had to. And for the most part, as I've said many times, most days it's fun.
In restoring the Davenport Hotel, Walt and Karen Worthy make 2 hard decisions. One is amazingly practical, the other is practically amazing. First, what to do with the oldest part of the hotel, the eastern third of the block dating back to the 1800s, including Davenport's restaurant, his personal apartment, the adjoining Pennington Hotel, and Spokane's first and finest ballroom, the Hall of the Doges.
We thought long and hard about it. It was on again and off again 6 different times, but in the end it had to go. And as we look back on it, it should have been a no-brainer to know that it had to go right to start with. The hotel did in fact need a loading dock, and we did in fact need a new ballroom, and we did need a new grand entrance to the hotel. And these are the things that are going to make the hotel work. And everybody needs to remember, we're not building a museum. We need to have people expeditiously check in and out and be able to come out of the weather with their luggage and have ease of operations for garbage in, garbage out, supplies in, supplies out. So that lots of different reasons this hotel were closed have been cured during this restoration.
Before ordering demolition, Worthy decides several things can be removed from the old Davenport and reused in the new one. A clock tower from the southeast corner, an elaborate cupola from the restaurant's north door, pieces of Mr. Davenport's apartment, and the entire Hall of the Doges.
That was one of the easier things really to accomplish. Maybe it was perhaps lucky to stumble upon the idea to do it that way, but trying to figure out how to get a heat and air conditioning run from the basement up to the Elizabethan room has been far more difficult than pulling the Hall of Doges out, or to get fresh air into the ballrooms that never did have fresh air before. And some of the ductworks is big around as an automobile that has to be concealed behind all these walls and still keep the ballrooms intact. So there have been lots bigger challenges in moving the Hall of Doges. It was a reasonably simple thing once we decided that that's what we wanted to do.
The Hall of the Doges is the queen of Spokane's ballrooms, built over Davenport's restaurant in 1904. Architect Kirtland Cutter borrows design cues from the palaces of the Italian doges, or rulers of medieval times. The hall is built like a wedding cake, with a large first layer and a smaller second layer. The first layer is measured and marked for disassembly.
Okay, here we are inside the area where we're getting ready to move the Hall of Doges.
The second layer is cut free to be lifted out intact. Walt Worthy takes the last pictures of the room as built in the early 20th century. It will soon be wrapped in plastic and put to sleep for 8 months to awaken in a 21st century Davenport hotel. A crowd of several hundred onlookers gather at dusk to watch a building fly.
Look at that. No more than a foot. Look at that. It was the same thing as moving a house, basically. We slid 2 iron beams lengthwise underneath the hollow doges and popped it right out. Logistically, fairly simple process. Okay, here's what we're looking like this morning. Started the demolition an hour or so ago.
Demolition begins unceremoniously the next morning. The eastern third of the block is taken down to the dirt. Except for the public rooms, the rest of the hotel is gutted from wall to wall. The hardest part of the demolition is cleaning out the basement. Originally, it's proudly described as the biggest and most complicated plumbing job in the Pacific Northwest. Now it's a nightmare, complete with giant electrical panels right out of a horror movie. All of this must go. All of the guest rooms are destroyed, all that is, except for room 730, the circus room. Louis Davenport has a friend with a passion for the circus. Sign painters create this room in the mid-1930s to honor him. The mural covers the entire room and features a circus parade with performers and clowns and animals of all sizes. This room makes a big impression on a little girl from Bridgeport who stays here with her mother in the early 1950s.
When I arrived at the hotel with my mother, the bell clerk looked down at me and said, "Oh, would you like the circus room?" And, you know, my eyes got big. I didn't know what in the world he was talking about. But my mother said, "Oh, sure, that would be great." And so when we got up here were all of these beautiful circus motifs all around, circus characters all around the walls of the room, and I was amazed.
The circus room is used both as a guest room and banquet room over the years. Charles Libby snaps these ladies lunching in the circus room in 1937.
This thing has really been hammered. You can see how, you know, it's been abused. There are lots of pinholes that I tried to fill that looks like people had actually sort of thrown darts at it or something.
Artist Melville Holmes restores what he can and repairs the rest, true to the spirit of the sign painters that leave their mark here a half a century ago. Even Louis Davenport is pictured in the scene.
I think very highly of these artists. If you look at their confidence and assurance of their brushwork and the variety of caricatures, it's very impressive to me.
The original light fixtures are rewired and rehung, giving the effect of colored balloons hanging from the ceiling. The room will be used for birthday parties and childcare in the new Davenport Hotel.
Bound up with this institution, the Davenport Hotel, are what I call timeless humane values. They went into Davenport's vision of the place in the way he ran his business, the hospitality, the graciousness, the gentility, refinement, of course, beauty. More than just hospitality, but a graciousness to all comers, insisting that his staff be gracious and smile. I think that some of these qualities, when I first came in here, I thought that I discerned them even in the architectural structure of the thing. This idea of bringing the old world beauty and cultural interest and richness and history in some way to the new world, establishing it here for virtually anyone who comes through the door to enjoy.
The lobby skylights, tarred over by the blackout laws of World War II, now let sunshine into the lobby again, something no one younger than 60 today ever sees here before. The Davenport Hotel remains Kirtland Cutter's greatest professional achievement. Deeply in debt, his house repossessed, and no work on the horizon, Cutter leaves Spokane in 1923. He spends the rest of his life working in Long Beach, California. His ashes are sprinkled into the Pacific Ocean in 1939.
Who could have known that the Worthies could pull this off? It has not only given us back our youth, it has given us back our faith in our city, our faith in ourselves, our faith in the fact that hard work and diligence and belief and loyalty to your principles and to the things for which you and your city stand are possible. They do come true. And here we are with literally a dream on our hands that came true. So it has wiped out decades of disappointment and disenchantment and has sort of refurbished our souls, you might say.
Although the Davenport Hotel covers an entire block, there are many intimate spaces where one can write a letter, for example, or read a book. The 1919 novel, The Desert of Wheat by Zane Grey, says, the Chamber of Commerce sent an imperative appeal to representative wheat raisers, ranchers, lumbermen, farmers, and bade them come to Spokane to discuss the situation. They met at the Hotel Davenport, where luncheon was served in one of the magnificently appointed dining halls of that most splendid hotel in the West. A hotel's reputation is usually made famous by where it is or who stays there. The Davenport in its prime made Spokane famous, and it itself was more famous than anyone that stayed here.
So I waited on Raymond Burr, and I waited on the Kingston Trio, which was a very popular group back then. In fact, I have one of their recordings that they gave me, and I didn't get it autographed. And I waited on Lawrence Welk and his whole entourage. And I waited on Judy Garland when she was here making an appearance. And I waited on Gene Autry. And I waited on Elvis. I had to wait on him out in the coffee shop because two of his bodyguards were not old enough to go in the bar, so I had to serve him and his other two bodyguards out in the coffee shop. And I didn't get his autograph either.
Rick Mendoza starts as a busboy and works his way up to maitre d' at the Matador Room. While the restaurant he masters doesn't exist anymore, the lessons he learns there master him still.
I was 16 years old when I came here. Betty Waddell, the manager, took me under her wing, and she told me she was going to show me how to get along in the world. And that's why I always say shaking hands, kissing babies, and signing autographs. It was to spit and polish. And she showed me how to be spit and polish, shining my shoes, creasing my pants, and being very polite. And that in itself was something you can't learn in school. It's a human experience, and it's a human education. And I learned, and I carry that with me to this day on how to communicate with individuals, with people.
When the Davenport Hotel opens in 1914, most people arrive by train. They are shuttled to and from the train depot in federal hotel buses. Personal automobiles become more and more popular through the 20s and 30s, aided in part by car shows in the large public areas of the Davenport Hotel, including the lobby and the mezzanine. Guest parking is added to the Davenport in 1940, both under and across the street from the hotel. In the early 1950s, pigeonhole parking is installed in the Davenport Hotel garage, with room for almost 300 cars. It fills to capacity every day of the week.
Once we park a car on the lower floor, we can lock the car, give you the keys. We can, if it has an outside hood latch, we can lube it, oil change tires, fill it with gas, wash it, without ever getting inside of it.
Robertson remembers playing basketball with the Harlem Globetrotters in the garage once and remembers asking Bing Crosby to sign his parking ticket.
There was one car that we couldn't put on the elevator. Well, of course, any that was too small we couldn't. But a Packard, the newer Packards, had what they called an air ride, and the air ride stuck down behind the rear wheels, and the elevator dolly would knock them off. We only did that once and never did another Packard.
The Davenport Hotel parking garage lasts until 1970 when it is demolished for a new Davenport Convention Center that is never built. The lot sits empty for the next 30 years, finally serving as off-site storage for pieces of the hotel during its renovation. This steel and glass cupola from the north side of the hotel is reinstalled over the hotel's new east entry, where it continues to protect guests from the weather. The Davenport Hotel is no longer the tallest building on Spokane's skyline. A modern city grows up around the National Historic Site. There's no question Spokane's economy helps build the Davenport Hotel. One may also say Spokane's economy helped save it.
If we had had a pretty good economy and somebody had had the idea to erect another 14 or 15 or 16-story building in downtown Spokane, that would have been a logical place. Very central. You could have bought the building for the cost of destroying it, but there just wasn't a demand for any building in 1990, and that was a lucky thing. By the way, that's a phenomenon in historical preservation. If you look around the cities that are largely preserved, very often they were pumped up with beautiful buildings and so forth, and then their economies went into a slide so that it made no sense to tear away that and replace it with something better. So yeah, economic good times can be as destructive as it can be constructive.
The stars just lined up to make it possible for us to consider doing this. And I guess it was lucky for us and lucky for this hotel that was the case. And it's pretty unusual that you'd find anybody that would be in position to do what we just done, I would think. There'd be a lot of reasons not to.
The Davenport is always a business, but it is also a gallery of art, the art of hospitality, the art of architecture, the art of painting and plaster. All of these arts are alive again in the new Davenport Hotel.
From here I have to do a little bit of work on fixing these cracks. Just few imperfections, then get the soil off of it. Once I get the oil off, build the frame. And after that we just pour it with a plaster.
Making a positive image again.
Yes.
While some of Cutter's original iconography only needs cleaning and painting, much of it is in need of serious repair. Not content to make something kinda like the original, Peter Shiva makes it look exactly like the original.
It's a hotel like I've never seen. I've been in many hotels. I've been in Germany and in America and Russia. I've never seen one like that. It's just amazing.
I think Louis would be enchanted because it has preserved his spirit, and the beauty that he created is all back there. I think he would be so delighted and so proud of what this has become, because it recaptured his spirit and enhanced it, added to it. And I think that Louis Davenport would just be personally so pleased that he has so many thousands of people in love with his hotel and actually, in a way, in love with Louis Davenport and all that he did for his hometown.
The Davenport Hotel is also a celebration of the culinary arts. The original standards of food service are set by Chef Matthew, who presides over a silent city within a city. Executive Chef Ian Wingate, who presides over the new Palm Court restaurant and other main floor food service, is setting a new standard of culinary art at the Davenport. Raised with an Asian influence and classically trained, Wingate fuses East and West in a dazzling new show on the finest stage in town.
I want to feel good about every meal that goes out, and I want a wow on everyone's face, every dish that is presented in front of them, and I want them to walk out with the feeling like, yeah, the Davenport is back, and it's going to stay.
Most of the people who build the new Davenport Hotel never meet the old one. In their lifetimes, it is always closed. Even at its worst, the hotel still inspires a new generation of tradespeople and craftspeople to do their best.
I walked in and I was just awestruck. Couldn't believe it. Didn't think anything like this could be in Spokane, and never thought anything would be like this in Spokane. And just first place I walked into was the lobby, and just saw the enormousness of it, how big it was, and all the detail that went into it, and couldn't believe it. I was awestruck, really.
Even with power tools, it takes longer to renovate the hotel than it takes to build it. For some things, though, like applying 22-karat gold leaf, human hands remain the best tools.
I think the time that I'm most proud of is working on the chandeliers in the lobby. Some of the, rewiring the chandeliers and cleaning them, and figuring out how they were put together. It was a challenge, to say the least, but it was really interesting to see the quality of the light fixtures that are built back at the turn of the century compared to today's.
What appear to be highly carved oak beams throughout the lobby are, in fact, made of plaster. Decades of smoke and dust turn all of them a dark, sticky brown. Weeks of scrubbing the ceiling with a toothbrush and simple green reveal faces that haven't smiled in years.
I'm proud of it. I like watching everybody's face when they come in and see it. It's a whole lot different than what it was. I mean, even people who have worked there for years and years didn't realize that that's actually how it's supposed to look. And I think that's probably kind of really neat to feel, that you're uncovering something like a treasure. It's a treasure.
For so long, these beams play to the eye like a trumpet through a mute. Now, as sunlight joins in, they play clear and strong, as Cutter originally dreams they can.
I guess I'll feel more joy that I had a part of history in Spokane, that it means so much to other people, and I was a part of not just the hotel, but other people's lives. And when seeing people come back that have been here in the past, and they come back to the new renovated hotel, seeing their faces, bringing back memories, and see their eyes glitter and tears come to their eyes and smiles to their faces. I think I'm really looking forward to that.
Those who remember the old Davenport invariably compare it to the new one. Those who make the comparison are invariably impressed.
I would say they're very similar. I think they have gotten the magic touch of bringing forth the light and enhancing the things that are already there. I think the cleaning job has been excellent, and then they've tinted places to give it maybe more depth in the panels upstairs, and they've just done very clever things, and I think they're very artistic people, and they've added their little touch. I'm sure Mr. Davenport would be just thrilled beyond words. He'd be so happy.
Spokane's First Lady of Public Halls is soon to be the belle of the ballrooms again. The Hall of the Doges celebrates its 100th birthday as its younger sister, the Grand Pennington Ballroom, is born. Spokane's oldest and newest ballrooms now sit side by side, thanks to the vision of a man called Worthy. Perhaps it is meant to be.
One of our employees had been in an antique shop down in the Tri-Cities and brought back a box that said Davenport chocolates. Well, Walt and Karen were out of town, and so I just put it on his desk and didn't think anything about it. Afterwards, when he got back, I said, "Hey, Walt, look at this box." And as we opened it up, this is serious. Inside, there was this little piece of paper that lays on top of the chocolates, and it says Davenport chocolates, worthy of the name. So it's almost prophetic, you know, from 1914 to now, that when it arose again, it was going to be the worthies that are going to do it.
I don't think we ever envisioned it was going to be such a huge, overwhelming endeavor. It's been wonderful, but we had no idea. Not to say we wouldn't still do it again, but it was much larger.
And much more
intricate.
costly too. It's really taken every ounce of energy and money and courage and willpower and all the rest of it to hold this together.
The timing was right, and he was ready for a new challenge.
And boy, did I ever get one.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have missed it. I'd hate to be sitting here 20 or 30 years from now wondering if I could have.
Spokane's Age of Elegance and its champion, the Davenport Hotel, are only history lessons to generations born in a world of personal computers, compact discs, and cellular phones.
Our third graders are accumulating a year-long study of Spokane history, and it accumulates with a unit on the Age of Elegance, and we visit some of the mansions within the Spokane area and talk about the Davenport and Mr. Davenport and his contribution to our city. And this is supposed to reenact a Davenport experience.
History tells us there is, once upon a time, a Gilded Age, when men and women dress up for a night on the town, when restaurants have orchestras, and when one of America's exceptional hotels is in Spokane, Washington. Sometimes history repeats itself.
The hotel is now a fact. It's no longer an if or maybe or hope so. I envision beautiful dances where people have an opportunity to dress up in an elegant setting for an elegant occasion that doesn't happen that often, but often enough to be repeated in different ways, that they don't have occasions for. There's no place for it, but they miss this in their lives. Many people do, I think. To dress formally, to dress beautifully, and to have an experience and have a night to remember. It's not what we usually think of as a contemporary thing to do. It's something that people used to do. Can we recover that? Can we do those things again? I think we can.
Louis Davenport wrote, "The success of the Davenport Hotel must always be measured by the satisfaction it gives its guests and by the manner in which it reflects the community hospitality. In all things, the hotel sincerely tries to so well please its guests that they will be glad they came, sorry to leave, and eager to return. The Davenport Hotel celebrates its 88th birthday on the occasion of its grand reopening. It continues to be one of America's exceptional hotels." I'm Ellen Travolta, thanking you for watching and joining you in celebrating the Davenport Hotel, grand again. Bye for now.
Thank you for everything, dear old friend.